the anatomy of historical fury, memory, morality, and the civilizational unconscious of Hindu extremism. The transformation of moral time from history to indictment. The rise of Hindu extremism in contemporary India transcends conventional political analysis, revealing itself as a fundamental restructuring of collective consciousness, a psychological and philosophical reordering of how a civilization inhabits its past. This phenomenon represents not merely the ascendance of a political ideology, but a seismic shift in the Hindu psyche concerning the relationship between memory and morality. At its core lies a transformation in the perception of moral time. The past ceases to function as a completed, contextual sequence of events and instead becomes an active, open ledger. Its perceived injustices demanding urgent settlement in the political and social present. This essay traces this transformation through its historical genesis, its psychological manifestations in culture and violence, and its profound philosophical contradictions. It argues that this trajectory represents not civilizational confidence, but a perilous regression that threatens the syncretic soul of India itself. The colonial implant and its fragile peace, a liberal interregnum. To understand the contemporary resurgence, one must first examine the historical interlude that temporarily suspended older civilizational patterns. British colonial rule, while fundamentally exploitative, inadvertently grafted a Western liberal educational framework onto Indian soil. This system produced a distinct class, epitomized by the leadership of the Indian National Congress, that internalized Enlightenment-derived values, secular rationalism, constitutional governance, historical objectivity, and civic nationalism. For this Anglophone elite, history was an academic discipline to be studied with critical distance, not an emotional reservoir to be weaponized for mobilization. Their project was the construction of a modern nation-state where citizenship, predicated on legal equality, would supersede primordial religious identities. This liberal ethos created what can be termed a temporary suspension of deeper memory. It established a discursive framework where Hindu-Muslim relations were to be negotiated within the arenas of politics, law, and resource sharing, domains considered secular and manageable. Within this framework, Indian Muslims were conceptualized as fellow citizens within a shared civic project, not as symbolic avatars of historical conquest. This period was not an erasure of the past, but its deliberate bracketing, a conscious choice to build a future unshackled from ancient grievances. The popular culture of the era, particularly the golden age of Hindi cinema, served as the most vibrant testament to this suspended consciousness. Films from this early period portrayed a naturally syncretic social world. They assumed a shared cultural fabric with Urdu-infused dialogue, syncretic music, and Muslim protagonists woven seamlessly into narratives. Think of classics like Qurbani, where Vindod Khana, with his Pashtun features, danced alongside Feroz Khan, embodying a confident, inclusive India. Muslim characters were integrated organically into stories of universal human emotion and national belonging. Their identity was a facet of character, not its defining, problematic core. This cinematic universe did not argue for tolerance. It simply presumed a shared cultural fabric. It mirrored the Nehruvian liberal project in its attempt to forge a new future by consciously, if temporarily, setting aside the burdens of history. In retrospect, however, this era appears precisely as an interregnum, a piece borrowed from foreign intellectual traditions, its roots not deep enough to withstand the eventual return of indigenous memory. The psychic return, memory reactivated as grievance. The gradual waning of the liberal elite's intellectual hegemony, coinciding with the deepening of mass democracy and the assertion of vernacular political voices, created the conditions for the powerful return of suspended memory. This return was neither a neutral act of historical recall nor a revival of tradition in a benign sense. It was, rather, a process of moral reactivation, a psycho-historical shift whereby the past flooded into the present not as a lesson or a context, but as a standing indictment. Within this reactivated narrative, cultivated through networks of vernacular education, politicized pilgrimage, tirthayatra, popular historiography and social discourse, the medieval period was reconstructed not as a complex epoch of state formation, cultural synthesis and conflict, but as a monolithic, centuries-long narrative of humiliation. Key tropes, temple destruction, iconoclasm, loss of sovereignty, were extracted from their complex historical contexts and woven into a simplified saga of Hindu victimhood and foreign desecration. Consequently, the present-day Indian Muslim undergoes a subtle but profound transformation in the collective Hindu imagination. They are increasingly perceived not first and foremost as a neighbour or co-citizen, but as a historical residue, a living reminder, an unconscious inheritor of that medieval trauma. Their contemporary identity becomes partially shrouded by a symbolic shadow cast from the past. In this psychic economy, Pakistan assumes a role far beyond that of a geopolitical adversary. It becomes the indispensable, externalized symbol, the reified and territorialized embodiment of the invader made perpetually present. It functions as the tangible, modern-day receptacle for historical animosity, allowing a medieval grievance to find a contemporary address. The political rise of the Bharatiya Janata Party, BJP, and its ideological ecosystem, the Sangh Parivar, is crucial here. They are best understood not as the original architects of this deep-seated sentiment, but as its most adept and powerful political crystallizers. They provided a coherent language, cultural nationalism, correcting historical wrongs, institutional muscle, and electoral legitimacy to a psychological shift that was already germinating within broad sections of society. This shift was further fueled by post-1990s economic confidence and a global zeitgeist of civilizational assertion, cultural pedagogy, cinema, and the normalization of the suspect community. The shift from a suspended to an activated memory is most visibly and potently chronicled in the evolution of India's dominant popular culture, mainstream Hindi cinema. Cinema here operates not as mere entertainment or reflection, but as a form of social pedagogy. It normalizes moral intuitions, scripts social relationships, and defines the boundaries of the we and the they. The contrast with the earlier interlude is stark. The assumed, unself-conscious syncretism of classic cinema has fractured. In numerous contemporary big-budget narratives, Muslim characters are increasingly relegated to stereotypical roles: the fanatical terrorist, the treacherous sleeper agent, the culturally alien other within. Pakistan is no longer just a rival nation, but is frequently mythologized as an eternal, existential, and essentially evil foe. These narratives do not simply depict conflict, they moralize it, often framing contemporary tensions as the latest chapter in an eternal civilizational war. This consistent representational pattern performs a crucial psychological function. It transmutes historical suspicion into contemporary common sense. When a community is repeatedly visualized through the lens of inherent disloyalty or ancestral guilt, violence against it, when it occurs, ceases to feel like a shocking aberration. It can instead be subconsciously rationalized as a form of delayed justice or righteous collective defense. A profound and often overlooked cultural signal in this process is the systematic marginalization of Urdu. Once the beloved language of lyrical expression and shared poetic sensibility in film, the tongue of the ghazal and sophisticated dialogue, Urdu is now often treated as a foreign or Muslim language, its use rendered self-conscious and politically charged. This linguistic purification is deeply symbolic, mirroring the broader ideological project of historical and cultural purification. It represents an attempt to cleanse the present-day national identity of elements perceived as contaminating residues of a painful past, thereby severing living connections to a composite heritage. The logic of blood debt, lynching and the annihilation of moral distance. The most horrific and logically consistent endpoint of this activated, vengeful memory is the phenomenon of mob lynching, particularly those triggered by allegations of cow slaughter or love jihad. These acts are not mere outbursts of communal violence, they are ritualized performances of historical judgment. Lynching deliberately bypasses the modern state's institutions of law, courts, evidence, due process, individual culpability, which are predicated on secular, contemporaneous justice. Instead, it enacts a form of retributive sovereignty claimed directly by the collective, based on a higher, historically justified moral law. For such an act to be psychologically possible for the perpetrators and passively acceptable to a segment of society, a prior metaphysical conviction must exist. The belief that the victim is not and cannot be fully innocent in principle. Their guilt is not solely about the alleged immediate act, which is often fabricated or exaggerated, but is hereditary or collective, a stain inherited from history. The Muslim body thus becomes a site upon which historical accounts are violently settled. This brings us to the central, terrifying philosophical question laid bare by this violence. Can historical wrongs be morally inherited? Does the violence of a Mahmud of Ghazni in the 11th century morally license violence against a Muslim dairy farmer in 21st century Uttar Pradesh? To answer yes is to collapse all moral and historical reasoning. It commits a double ethical fallacy. First, it judges past actors by the evolved moral standards of the present, an act of moral anachronism. Second, it assigns that retroactive guilt collectively and hereditarily to entirely different individuals in the present. If this logic were applied universally and consistently, no civilization on Earth could escape a perpetual, chaotic cycle of vengeance, as every group has been both victim and perpetrator across the bloody scroll of history. The Hun, the Mongol, the Greek, the Roman, the Crusader, all would have endless claims against the present. Modernity's painful achievement, born of the Enlightenment and its global echoes, was precisely the fragile principle that moral agency and legal responsibility are individual and contemporaneous. The lynching mob represents the utter rejection of this principle, regressing to a pre-modern tribal notion of blood debt. The philosophical abyss, moral anachronism, and the myth of purity. The ideological core of this historical vengeance movement rests on a profound philosophical error. Moral anachronism, coupled with radical historical selectivity. It applies the 21st century liberal norm of religious tolerance and the inviolability of places of worship to judge the actions of 11th century conquerors whose worldview operated on entirely different principles of kingly duty, iconoclasm, and the spoils of war. Yet, in the same breath, it abandons the modern liberal principle of individual innocence, applying an archaic, collective notion of guilt that spans centuries. This is a deeply politicized and selective reading of history. Conquest, plunder, enslavement, and the destruction of rival political and religious symbols were the grim, universal norms of pre-modern statecraft and imperial expansion, from the Romans destroying Carthage to the Christian Reconquista. To single out one strand of this global history for exclusive, obsessive condemnation is not historical analysis. It is the creation of a political mythology. This mythology replaces the complex, ambivalent, and often synergistic tapestry of Indian history with a simplistic, binary saga of perpetual native innocence and foreign villainy. It seeks not to understand the past, but to weaponize a curated version of it, denying history its own temporality, context, and intrinsic complexity. The forgotten indigenous antidote, impermanence, and the genius of synthesis. The supreme irony of this historical fury is that Indian civilization itself produced one of the world's most profound philosophical antidotes to such obsessive, vengeful memory, the Buddhist doctrine of anicca, impermanence. This core insight taught that all conditioned phenomena, empires, dynasties, identities, victories, defeats, grievances, even the gods as humans conceive them, are transient, composite, and devoid of enduring essence. The marauders are gone. Their empires have dissolved into dust. Their motivations are inaccessible to us. What remains is not a debt, but a sediment, the cultural, linguistic, and artistic material that survives the passage of time. This sediment is the very substance of Indian civilization, and it is overwhelmingly syncretic. To view the magnificent legacy of Indo-Islamic culture, the sublime poetry of Ghalib and Mir, the ethereal beauty of the Raga, the architectural splendour of Fatehpur Sikri or the Taj Mahal, the administrative vocabulary of Persian, the cuisine, the clothing solely through the bitter lens of humiliation, is not an act of civilizational pride, but of profound civilizational self-harm. It is to repudiate the very genius that allowed India to repeatedly transform foreign influxes into new, rich layers of its own identity. The ghazal did not survive Muslim rule. It was born from the confluence of Persian and Indian musical and poetic sensibilities, becoming a quintessentially Indian form of expression. This capacity for absorption, adaptation, and creative synthesis is the historical strength being tragically renounced. The living geography underscores this continuity. The river Gomal, mentioned in ancient Hindu texts, still flows. The echo of the Buddha's dukkha resonates in the Sariki Duk spoken on the banks of the Indus, in the foothills of Takhti Sulaiman. These are not abstract historical points, but living threads connecting the present to a past that defies simple communal categorization. They testify to a civilizational depth that political mythology deliberately flattens. Conclusion: the frenzy that consumes its own future. India today stands at a critical juncture, gripped by what can be diagnosed as a historical fever, a condition where an inflamed, curated memory of the past overwhelms the moral and rational faculties needed to navigate the present and build a future. In the fervent quest to avenge history, Hindu society, or a significant militant segment of it, risks becoming the ultimate prisoner of that same history. It chains itself to an identity defined primarily by victimhood, requiring the perpetual presence of a historical oppressor in the form of the Muslim citizen. Meanwhile, Indian Muslims are reduced from full citizens with rights and agency to symbolic phantoms of the past, targeted not for their actions, but for what they are unconsciously imagined to represent. This trajectory does not signify civilizational confidence. It betrays a deep-seated insecurity masquerading as strength. True civilizational confidence is forward-looking. It is secure enough to acknowledge a complex, sometimes painful past without being psychically enslaved by it. It can celebrate the glories of the Gupta or Chola empires without needing to use them as a cudgel against fellow citizens. It can recognize the destructiveness of certain historical episodes without demanding a retributive pound of flesh from unrelated descendants. The India that has historically captivated the world. The India of breathtaking pluralism, of shared melodies in which Hindu and Muslim musicians created the khayal, of intellectual traditions that debated and synthesized, cannot be sustained on a diet of curated resentment. It thrives on memory tempered by wisdom, on the recognition that the ultimate homage to history is not to reenact its cycles of violence, but to break them. The ghosts of the past cannot be slain on the streets of the present. They can only be laid to rest through the courageous, compassionate act of remembering fully. Remembering not just the pain of destruction, but also the profound beauty of creation that emerged, often miraculously, from the very crucible of conflict. The river of time, as the ancients knew, carries forward both silt and song. The choice before India is whether to be dragged under by the swirling sediment of ancient grievances, or to learn once more how to navigate its currents and harmonize with its enduring, syncretic music. The former path leads to a narrow, embittered, and perpetually conflicted polity. The latter, though arduous, leads toward reclaiming the expansive, resilient, and truly confident civilization that India has, at its best, always embodied